Security check. Done.
Fantastic.
So, why this podcast, my friend?
That's actually the first question I had for you. You were very excited about it. You brought it up and you really pushed hard for it. So I want to know why. Why now? And what specifically made you feel like podcasting was the right move for you right now?
I just feel like at this point we're at a place where we like to hear so many stories. Like, we always want to talk to people. We always want to know what someone's doing, where they're at in life. And no matter where you are, you're asking somebody what their journey's been, right? So for me, it's just been etched in my memory that I want to know what people are doing and why they're doing what they're doing. So stories help me figure my own stuff out, and I want to take those stories to more people, and that's part of why I wanted to start a podcast.
Is there anything specific you want to figure out?
I'm most curious, honestly, to find out what drives people. Like, why are people actually doing what they're doing? One. Two, I have the strong feeling that many across the world, don't like what they do. And it's like getting deep into understanding why they're doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't like it, why they're still doing it. If they like it, why they're still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So some of those things you can only find out when you're sitting with someone over a cup of coffee on a podcast, raw, authentic, and just really trying to understand what goes on in their mind. And getting that story out to people will also give people more perspective. So that's kind of the reason why this podcast is something I've been wanting to start.
How long has it been on your mind?
Starting the podcast?
Yeah.
I think the first time I thought about starting a podcast was probably 2021. I was
COVID.
living in like about a year into like peak COVID. I was living in India and I was working at a tech startup, but I was doing that and realizing that I love talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
I could be whatever professionally, but ultimately I thrive in an environment where I'm just talking to people and communicating a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So client facing became a big thing for me. And that got my mind swirling into maybe you should start a podcast, Rohan. And I spoke to some friends, a lot of our common friends. I just never got down to it. And I think I just reached a stage where I was like, I need to get into this, say I'm doing it, and go and do it. We bought a mic yesterday, and here we are today, right? It just needs to be done, and until you start, I don't quite think you'll ever feel committed enough to wanting to do it. So that's part of why.
Why not do it alone?
Podcasts aren't fun alone.
Fair enough.
Like, you need multiple perspectives in a podcast, right? You're a smart intellectual guy coming from a different background. I'm a occasionally smart intellectual guy coming from a different background, right? So until you get those different perspectives, I think you can't extract all the best information from someone. So when we have a guest sitting across us, I want as much value coming in that podcast, and that's going to happen when there's multiple perspectives, including the guests. That's where raw, authentic conversation flows.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, I think podcast is an interesting way to just communicate with people today, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's people running listening to a podcast. There's people walking listening to a podcast. Conversation starters at so many social events that we go to as well. It's all, what podcast are you listening to? Did you hear what he said? Did you hear what she said? And it's little nuggets like that that can add so much value in the most minuscule ways in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
If we can be a part of that, I think ultimately it's just getting that story out there, right? Being a part of that.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good, strong start to our podcast.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, because these are some things we've kind of touched on in discussions, but we've never gone into, and it's nice to finally get into that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times we just say, save it for the pod, but like, why?
Yeah.
It's finally nice to get into that for sure.
Exactly.
All right. So since this is more of a introduction, get to know the two of us. Um, I think it's a good time to transition into just the part of life you're in right now.
Yeah.
What's going on, your headspace, how you're dealing with the different things. I guess that's a little leading because I kind of know what you're dealing with, so I'm kind of going to push into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so going off of that, you've had a relatively rough 2 years. Why? What all happened? I'd like you to talk about all of that. How'd you get through it? How did that change you as a person? What did you learn from it?
It's a reminder not to do a podcast with a friend that you talk to about everything. That's a loaded question. There's
I
like
know.
4 loaded questions in there.
That's a long one.
I think the last 2 years have just been. I moved to New York 2.5 years back, like on a whim. I was working in India. I was enjoying the work. I was playing tennis like 3 hours a day. It was ideal. I actually was enjoying life. And an opportunity shows up, and they're like, "Move to New York." Tough. You will never refuse that offer, right? It's like you got to take your chances. And I was handed a chance on a silver platter. I earned it, I think. I made the move 2.5 years back, and part of that journey has just been so much adaptation. And I said this to you yesterday as well, right? It's so understated how much you have to adapt when you're making a move like that. Because it's not just isolated, I've moved to New York. You're moving to the craziest city in the world. You have to make friends, you have to find community, you have to do well professionally. You're moving for a job, you have to pay your bills, you have to get your shit done, right? And I think I've been fortunate, been exposed from a very young age, traveled a lot with family, studied in London. So I got really good exposure to people from everywhere in the world. But New York is a different beast. It's seriously a different beast because it's so vast, yet it's so tough to make friends. It's so vast, it can still feel so lonely. There's so much to do, but then there's days where you're still like, there's so little to do because you don't know who to do it with, right? Like they say in New York, dating is an extreme sport. And it really is, right? It's tough to find people to do stuff with, even though you know there's someone out there that you can do it with.
Yeah.
So I digress, but I think in those 2.5 years, I have been able to do so much. And as you get deeper and deeper into that journey, you get perspective in a place like that. You start meeting a lot of people and you start realizing things that are important to you. So the last 2 years have been positively rough because I've been able to meet people, I've been able to work at a large consulting firm and travel the world on my own dime, which has been very liberating. But it's also shown me that there are things that are very important to me that I don't quite think I was prioritizing enough, right? Because you get lost in this kind of wheelhouse of just keep doing it, stay here, you're doing well, you're in New York. And this takes me back to the first question that you asked, like, why did I start this podcast, right? This came ultimately from the perspective I got from just meeting people. I loved being with people, I loved asking questions, and I was personally impacted when I wanted to be by people's stories, right? So the roughness has been positive in that I'm sitting here now and I'm talking to you on a podcast that I've been thinking about for the last 2 years. And so I want to take that rough positivity in my life and not only execute and implement my own life, but also like bring out the best in other people's that may be listening to this, saying, you know what, it's okay not to be okay, but it's also okay to be confused. It's okay to be lost. It's okay to go through a rough patch. I'm 24 years old. You're 25 years old. That's perfectly normal, but it's not normalized in our generation, right? And then that's something I want to get into much deeper several times over the course of our podcast. We need to just normalize that feeling and say, you know what, it's okay. It really is.
It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not try.
Why
Is
do you
that
feel
a fair
that
way to summarize that?
Well, I'd ask you, like, why do you feel that way?
I don't think it's not fair to not try. I mean, I've always been a bit of a hard ass about these things, but I mean, if something's wrong, and sure, it's hard to get yourself out of those scenarios, the injury, that's another thing I want to get into, um, and the headspace that led you into. But when you're going through something like that, I don't think just because you're having a bad time, you do nothing about it. The only way you can stop having a bad time is if you actively do something about it. And so I completely agree with the idea and everything behind it, that it's okay to not be okay, but at the same time, it's definitely not okay to not try.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so yeah, talk to me about the headspace that the injury. First, about the injury, um, what happened, how that made you feel, because it was over an extended period of time, and someone with your athletic background and just love for fitness and sports, um, and not being able to do a lot of those things, how did that affect you, and how did you get through that?
I got a tattoo that said "Trust the process." That's what I did. It was like May of 2021.
Yeah.
May 18th, 2021, Rafa Nadal versus Novak Djokovic in the French Open semi-final.
Mhm.
And I came back that night and my shoulder was throbbing. I was like, you know what, it's muscular pain, it's gonna go. I play tennis every day, it makes sense.
Mm.
It's, what is today, May 5th, 2024,
Mhm.
and I'm now 90% into recovery. So it's been 3 full years of, I don't know, the most tumultuous emotional time of my life.
Mhm.
And it's been a journey. Like, I think it's one thing to say I've been going through it for 3 years, but it's another thing to actually go through it day to day and have your sleep impacted, have just your daily life. Like, I put a backpack onto work, my shoulder is suddenly hurting. I've met 8 different doctors and got 8 different viewpoints on what the problem is.
Mhm.
So, there's just been days where I've been like, I don't know, am I broken? Like, am I defective?
Mhm.
Do I have cancer in my shoulders? Is this ever gonna get fixed? And those are the kind of emotions that I always kept to myself, right?
Mhm.
Because for me, the funny thing here is my escape was always fitness.
Mhm.
I'd have these thoughts about everything else in my life,
Mhm.
and I'd escape into fitness,
Mhm.
or I'd escape onto a tennis court or a football field, go on a run. For the last 3 years, that escape's been much harder, right? I've had to reinvent myself and find other escapes. And when you're having these thoughts, the initial is, well, now what's my escape? Like, I'm feeling this. In another world, I would just go and lift some weights for an hour and I would seriously feel fine,
Mhm.
right? Now I don't know what to do. So, adapting to dealing with the day to day, especially having moved to New York just around that time,
Mhm.
it's been tough. I think emotionally, I've gone through all kinds of stuff in the last 2-3 years.
Mhm.
Physically, I've lost muscle, I've gained muscle, I've felt fat, I've felt thin, I've felt lethargic, I've felt low on energy. I've been eating well, I've been eating bad. It's all happened for me. And I wasn't used to that because my life was so routine. Like, if I had a good training session, my eating was right, my energy was good, I worked much more productively. The puzzle pieces just came together.
Yeah.
And for the last 3 years, I've been finding out how to get those puzzle pieces together.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where I've had to fill in with like newer things in my life and newer experiences and newer people. But all that to say, 3 years in, I think having trusted, to your point, trying and putting in the effort to know that on the other side of it I will be okay
Mhm.
has been the catalyst. And
Mhm.
now 3 years in, 90% into recovery, I feel like I don't have shoulder cancer. And
Shoulder cancer.
I'm recovering, right? At the end of
Yeah.
the day, I am reaching a stage where I'm gonna get back to normal life now,
Yeah.
very soon, hopefully. So just trust the process. Like, there's really nothing more you can do in situations like this.
Yeah.
You have to be positive as much as you can,
Mhm.
because you're gonna have terrible days,
Mhm.
and just hope that you come out on the other side, having put in the effort to get out on the other side.
Oh, that's good to hear. It's a good mindset to have, especially when you're dealing with a lot of things and you're not entirely sure if that'll ever end and how life will be different once you go through a decent part of it. Will you ever be able to play those things again? Will you ever be able to exercise the way you did? So, no, it's good to have that. I think that's one of the things that I've always respected about you the most as well. You're good with keeping your head down and going through it. Not a lot of people do that, and that's why I brought up it's not okay to not try, because even though you've not been okay for it's a relatively long time, you haven't stopped trying, and that's good. But okay, so that's a good summary of where you are right now. What's next?
With life?
With life.
We're getting into everything in podcast number 1.
Most of the other podcasts won't be much about us, so I guess this is most of the time that you get.
Yeah. What's next for me is taking a big bet on myself. I think I've been saying that for a bit.
A long time. Yeah.
I've been saying that for a long time, and when you say those kind of things, it comes with its own set of apprehensions.
Absolutely.
Right. In my opinion, even something like this, it's not the biggest bet in the world, but starting your own podcast, it is a big bet, right? At the end of the day, you've decided you're going to start something and you're actually going to do it.
Yeah.
Saying I want to start a podcast and actually starting the podcast.
It's a lot scarier when you actually sit down. Like, this is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking to a camera right now.
Yeah, it's not what I expected it to feel like.
Exactly.
Which is interesting. It'll take a while to get used to.
And I remember, 10 days back, we were sitting at 1 a.m. We had come back from somewhere and we were having a deep conversation. And you went, dude, this would be really good in a podcast.
Yeah.
And that's actually what got my mind swirling, because the podcast idea had been there.
Yeah.
And when you said that, it's like, we should do this together. And I remember coming to you the next day to your house and I was like, you know what, Ribhav? This is something that we should just start together and see where it goes. Different perspectives, good opinions, different experiences. We'll make something. And if we don't, we tried, right? 3 years of a failed startup is better than an MBA sometimes. You know what I mean?
I think all the time. But I'm not going to show an MBAs right now. That's for a later date. That's fine.
Yeah, let's get a professor for that one.
Yeah.
So I think what next is just taking a genuine big bet on myself, and right now is figuring out what that big bet's gonna be. I've already taken part of a big bet. Now it's using the momentum to take a bigger bet.
That's good.
That's where I'm at.
That's good. Yeah, you seem like a person who won't be able to live with themselves if you don't take a big bet early on.
Yeah, definitely.
So, makes sense.
Yeah,
exactly. I've
exactly.
been telling you this for a while.
Yeah.
So, no, that's good. I had another question which I'm forgetting. But, yeah, to the point of why you want to start this together, at least from my perspective, ever since we just started this in the past, it's been 20 minutes maybe, something like that. It's a lot easier to start with someone, because this, it's not a comfortable feeling at all.
Yeah.
I don't have the words to describe it, or maybe my brain is kind of fogged just by the whole moment of it. But yeah, it's definitely easier to do it with someone.
Yeah,
which is.
I think it brings out the best in each other as well.
Yeah,
right? Because you can bounce off each other.
Yes.
And even for a guest, then it doesn't feel as much as an interview. It's more of a conversation.
Yes.
I'm one-on-one with the guest. It could get awkward really quickly.
It could.
So having co-hosts also is you can fill in those silences. You can fill in those gaps, and that's part of the learning process on a podcast anyway, which we're going to be doing a lot of. But to be able to have that camaraderie and be good friends doing it just makes it so much easier. Right?
No, that makes sense.
So everything I'm saying to you right now, you already know, but it's definitely good to get it out.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm going to go back and see a lot of people's first podcast now to see how it was like, because I don't think I've ever thought about that. Because a podcast, you just think, okay, people sit, people talk, and they put it out there.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to do that when it's getting recorded, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, one's not used to having a camera in front of their face.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
But that actually brings me to asking you, when I came to you and I said, I've got this podcast idea, I didn't give you much.
No.
I just said, look, I want to bring out people's stories. I want to talk about people's journeys, and just have good conversations.
Mhm.
Because ultimately, that's what I've been doing. You've been doing all our lives, and
Mhm.
like, how can we bring that to a larger audience? When I came to you with that proposition, right? I know it was like 1 in the morning. We were having some kebabs. Why did you say, "I'll do this with you"?
Similar reasons as to what you've already brought up. It's honestly very selfish reasons. It's the easiest way for me to learn about a whole host of different topics and interact with, really interesting people. You don't just generally get to do that, right? And talk to them about what they do, why they do it, their life experience, their learnings. Um, it's a very great way to learn about people and about the things that they're passionate about. And that's really interesting to me. Um, I've also relatively, in school, I've been relatively um, not that open minded about different perspectives. Like, I thought of one thing, and if it made sense, that's it. It made sense. And not much beyond that. Um, but a lot of that changed ever since university started. Um, I don't know why. Maybe it's just a thing with growing up. Maybe it's something to do with maturity that comes living away from home. I don't know. But that was a huge change. And it was a change that I'm really happy about. And so, just to continue that, because I mean, changes don't just happen overnight, right? You have to put a lot of effort into it. And if something is going in the right direction, I think it would be wrong to not continue to put effort into it to keep it going in that direction. And so, for very selfish reasons, that's why I thought it would be a great idea for me to do it.
But when did you when did you feel like you had that change from being slightly more very pragmatic to I need to become a little more open minded? When did you feel that change? And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, it's one thing to feel it, it's another thing to actually implement
Mhm.
and be social and be good about it.
Mhm.
So, when did you feel that change, kind of the journey of that change come in your life?
I think pragmatism and open mindedness are not like exclusive. I think they go together. If you're a practical person, you're open minded. You know what I mean? And so, when did that change happen? That's a good question. I think just the exposure, going abroad, studying abroad, living alone,
Mm-hmm.
having that independence,
Mm-hmm.
it teaches you a lot.
Yeah.
And it exposes you to a lot. It was also the first time living with people who are not Indian, right? Not people that you grew up with, not people who speak the same language, not people who um, have the same cultural ideas, same cultural identities, all of that, right? And so you see all of this diversity around, and you interact with all of these people, and you see all of these different ideas, different backgrounds, different ways of thinking, different ways of approaching the same scenario, right? And honestly, that's beautiful. Like, there's a lot of it's very interesting, and there's just a lot to say about just humans in general.
Yep.
And I think that was the catalyst for me.
Were you apprehensive at all?
Definitely, I was not apprehensive. I was scared to make new friends because I never had to.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know how.
Yeah.
Because in school, you just grow up together. It's just it just happens. It's a thing. You've never thought about it, right? And suddenly you're just dropped into this new world. And as a kid, you don't have any filters, any what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have any apprehensions. Like, you'll play and your friends, right? And the more you grow up, the more those apprehensions kind of come in.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I don't know anyone here. Like, what do I do? And that's interesting because I don't feel like that anymore.
Yeah.
When I don't know anyone, it's actually exciting
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much more you can learn. But at that period, when you first get exposed to that, it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
and it's lonely. And that brings about a lot of changes in you. I feel like specifically for me, I have been changed the most, and I'm driven the most by negative emotion, in the sense that, like, what keeps me disciplined? It's guilt and the fear of failure. It's not happiness and I want to be successful. No, I'm scared of failure, And so, like a lot of changes, negative emotion of scared, lonely, changes you a lot more, at least changes me a lot more than I'm happy, I'm having a good time, all of those things, right? Because when you're happy, you're not really thinking about a lot of things. But when you're feeling negative emotions, at least for me, I tend to reflect a lot more. And you only really change behavior, learn things when you really think about what's going on, right? And I've tried to incorporate, we're getting way off topic, I don't even remember what you asked, but I've tried to incorporate that a lot more now that regardless of what's happening in life, just take some time out, just get bored every day, just think about what's happening, process life. Because university ended, that was 4 years. I processed 4 years in those 2 months after university. Where did that go? Like life is just running away. And I don't want to do that again. I want to process each day as it comes, and
Yeah.
anyway, that's way off topic.
That's a lot to unpack, and I think
Yeah.
that there's so many things that you can take away from everything you just said. Where my head immediately went is for any kid that's going to college right now, right, who may watch this, what would you say they can do to, one, make new friends? Everyone has to do it.
Yes.
And two, to limit how lonely they feel in college. Because for me at least, I think that's the biggest fear. Going into college, you don't know who your friends are going to be. You may feel lonely.
Yeah.
You don't know what your experience is going to be like, because that's made by the people.
Yes.
So what would you say is something that a college student...
I want to start it off by saying, don't listen to me. I'm just a 25-year-old. Don't listen to me. There are better people to listen to. But from my experience, I think what gets you in that spiral is your ego and self-centeredness, in the sense that you're always thinking about, what will people think if I do this? What will people, how do I look if I do this? How will I sound if I say this? How do I make friends? Will it be awkward if I go and talk to someone? No one cares about you. No one cares. They have their own stuff to do. Whatever you're thinking, everyone else is thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just take some time right now and think back to your first day of university and how other people just came and introduced themselves to you. You don't remember any of that. You just happened, just 6 months later, you were friends. That's all you really take away from that, right? And so really getting in your own head about, what should I do? Is this the right way to do it? No one cares. Literally no one cares. And so just do it. Just do whatever you want to do. And be yourself. Be authentic. I think that helps a lot with the loneliness as well, because if you're not being yourself and you're making friends, not being yourself, you will still be lonely, because you don't know if your friends are your friends for you or for who you are pretending to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that loneliness will always be there. And so it's a lot easier, in retrospect, of course. It's a lot easier to just be yourself, and if people don't like you for that, fair enough. At least you know that they don't like you for you. And it doesn't matter, because not everyone's going to like you.
Mm-hmm.
And you are a lot more likely to find your people that way and be a lot happier that way. You've known this about me for the longest time. I'm not going to pretend to believe in things or say things that I don't mean. If it is what it is. If we have a clash, we have a clash. It is what it is. You have a different perspective, I have a different perspective. That's fine. And that's how it should be, because if everyone had the same perspective, honestly, the world would burn. Right? If everyone acted and thought the way I thought, we would have a war right now. And so, it's good to have that, to have those different perspectives. You're not going to get along with everyone, and you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, take that for what you will. Don't listen to me. And yeah, just be yourself. Don't get in your head about, I'm scared, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. Just put yourself in uncomfortable situations. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. No one's going to remember it anyway. So, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Easier said than done, but...
I've just one last bit on this again, this loneliness thing, because it's so pivotal, right, in our generation, and with the amount of exposure that people our age and younger are getting, because we're traveling the world, either growing up with our families, or a lot more of us are now going to study abroad.
Mm-hmm.
With that comes the loneliness piece and the ripple effect of potential loneliness, which then goes into mental health and everything else. Not something we need to dig into today, but again, just on that loneliness piece and the authenticity piece that you said, oftentimes people can find it hard to even be authentic because they don't know who they really are, right? So when you are going into that new very uncomfortable position of college, and that could be abroad, that could be where you live, ultimately you're now only surrounded by new people and new communities you have to join, new clubs, new restaurants, new food types, everything changes, right? What is something that you did to actually help find yourself and feel like, you know what, I've spent 6 months, 1 year here now, this is who I really am.
Yes.
6 months, 1 year ago, this is not who I really was, and I was kind of putting up a front.
Yes.
How did you do that, and what was your catalyst there?
That's beautiful because I haven't done that yet. But it's a process. I think your early 20s, you're going to feel like you figured some stuff out. You're going to hit your mid 20s, where we are right now. And this is an overgeneralization. It could be completely false, but this is how I've seen it play out for a lot of my friends and for me as well. Yeah, early 20s, you feel like you figured some stuff out. You hit your mid 20s and you're like, I was wrong. And I don't know. You, for a while, you won't even know what to figure out.
Yep.
I'm still there. And then, in the latter part of your 20s, I think you get a better idea of, again, I don't know, but probably, hopefully, get a better idea of what you want to figure out and how you're going to figure all of those things out, right? And so, how I'm tackling that right now is exposure to different people. You learn a lot from people. You cannot overstate how much you can learn from different people. And that exposes you to different ideas. That exposes you to different ways of thinking. And that helps you understand what resonates with you and what doesn't. And that helps you find who you are. I think and I hope. Because that's what I'm doing right now. And I think that is what will work. And it's very uncomfortable being lost.
Yeah.
Because you don't even know which direction to go in. But that's the thing, right? When you don't know which direction to go in, when you don't know what to do, the only way you can figure anything out is to gather more information so that you have some information to make a decision with, right? How do you gather information? By doing something. Do something. Do anything. Start a podcast. Do anything, right? And somewhere along the way, you'll figure out that you like it or you don't like it. You'll figure out why you don't like it. You'll figure out something about yourself which will give you an idea to do something else, and then keep doing that. And at some point, someday, inevitably, you will find out what makes you tick, why it makes you tick, and who you are, right? And I think, again, that ties back to, it's okay not being okay, but it's not okay to not try.
Yeah.
Just do something. Like, just don't sit and feel bad for yourself that, oh, it's rough, or like, oh, everyone goes through a rough time, so let's just wait for it to get over. Because, no, it won't get over. Do something. Just anything.
Yeah. And I think on that piece, though, it's also important to emphasize that everyone moves at their own pace. And when I say that, I mean, you should try and you should do something to come out on the other side. But you have to also move at your own pace, where sometimes those patches bring out parts of you that you didn't know existed.
Yes.
And so, in those moments,
Mhm.
you may move at a lot faster pace than I would, right? You process faster. You process more practically. I process maybe as fast, but emotionally as well, right? So, in those situations, I almost feel like it's okay to move at your own pace where, yes, you put in the work to get out on the other side, but do it where you don't feel like you're adding more to your life, which is then bringing you back into that phase.
Yes.
It's like go step by step, trust the process, and know that you will get out on the other side. Just move at your own pace.
Yes.
And that's just something that personally I've lived by, and I know that you also live by that, because for you, and this ties back to a lot of what you just said. You said stuff about discomfort.
Mhm.
You said stuff about feeling lost,
Yes.
right? And now the moving at your own pace piece.
Yeah.
For you, your catalyst has always, same as mine, been fitness, right?
Yes.
You started 7-8 years back gymming. You were an athlete all your life before that. Played basketball, you played golf for India. You've done so many different things in that athletic field. You've now been in the gym 7-8 years. With something like that, right? You're here, you're 25 today, you're very mature, you've been able to go through a lot of emotions and deal with a lot through that journey. How do you think that has impacted your discipline, isolated to fitness, but then how has that also had that ripple effect in other areas of your life that you actually feel like have become more positive because of just having this one area so sorted?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. The thing with sports and fitness in general, if you're trying to be good at it, is it teaches you how to deal with failure, and it teaches you that, and it really drills down. It really drills down on the point that you can be as talented as you want, but it'll take you so far. If you're competing, and if you're competing at a high level, regardless of how good you were on day one and how quickly you pick things up, you will always be beaten by the person who outworks you 100% of the time, and there's no exception to that. And I think that's a very valuable lesson to learn at a young age, because in a lot of facets in life, you can sometimes get a little lucky. Let's say you're studying for an exam. For my entire life, study 2 days before, I've done all right? And sports are not something that'll allow you to do that. Fitness, when you're going to the gym, when you're trying to lift the type of weights you want to lift or look a certain way, it's not going to happen in 2 days, not going to happen in 2 months. You'll be very lucky if it happens in 4 years, right? And so that consistency and that discipline for any result whatsoever is drilled into you because of that, and you know this as well as anyone, right? And so I forget the exact wording of what your question was, but where I think it was where discipline kind of factors in and stuff.
Exactly.
I think like that's where discipline came in, right? And through the years, I haven't done sports in I'm probably since 12th grade, right? It's been 7, 8, whatever years.
Wow.
And it's been a while, and it carries forward to other parts of your life in the sense that you'll be motivated to do certain things. You might like your job right now, you might not like it tomorrow, you might like the project you're currently working on, you might not like the next one, you might have, that just a lot of things, right? And sometimes you have motivation, sometimes you don't. But consistency is the only thing that is absolutely required for success. And if you don't have discipline, you don't have anything. You'll be motivated for a week, you won't be motivated the next week, you'll be motivated the week after that. You go through those ebbs and flows, right? And it's a lot easier to work when you're motivated. It's fantastic, and you should use that. But the person who's going to beat you is also working when you're not motivated, and that's discipline. And so
well said.
and thank you. And it's so discipline. I don't want to be disciplined. I don't have a choice. I have to be disciplined because, like, if you think about life, right? Like, you could do something right now that you want to do isn't productive or isn't setting you up for the future, but you really want to do it right now. Sure, and that's fun and that's great. But think about the alternative. Isn't the alternative a lot scarier where 5 years later you haven't put in as much work as you could have and you regret that? You regret that wasted potential. If you just had that discipline, that's a scary thought because you don't get time back.
Yeah.
And as I said, like I said at some point, I'm more driven by negative emotion. Fuck, that drives me, dude. That scares me. And I have to be disciplined, otherwise, if I look back on my life 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, I'm like, wow, I just wasted a bunch of years of my life. I don't think I'd know how to deal with that.
Is there something you've done in your life recently, could be college or now even, that scared you to do, but you said, you know what, fuck this, I'm going to do it?
Most of the big decisions, I wouldn't say big, almost all decisions I make now are based on what will I regret less later, right? And we've spoken about this in the sense that, there's so much complexity in life that you have to navigate. If I can find a simple metric,
Such a cool.
try to find a
Yes,
simple
you
simple
mathematicians
metric.
only operate on numbers.
No, but it's
Metrics, numbers, let's quantify the problem and let's find the solution.
It makes
Always.
sense, right? And honestly, that's the only way I know how to operate, right? Like, if I can, so coming back to that, like, if I can simplify it to what will I regret less, I have a certain amount of information at any given moment. There are a lot of decisions that you don't want to make, even though you think that's the right decision to make because you're scared, because it could go wrong, this, that, and the other. But what if it went right, right? And it's that flip side that people don't think about. I was at a working at a bigger company, didn't necessarily enjoy a lot of that work, and it's not what I want to do. Nothing wrong with it. It was a great place to work, great environment, just not for me, right? But I was comfortable there, and comfort makes it hard to leave. Like, it's scary to leave. But I would have regretted not leaving, because if I just flip it over and look at the other side, it's scary to leave. What will I do? X, Y, Z, whatever. But what if I don't leave? What if I'm here when I'm 30? What if I'm here when I'm 35? What if I'm hating my job at that age? No, I like that. That's scary. That's way scarier than not knowing what to do right now.
Yep.
Right, and so that's how I make my decision now. What will I regret the least? Because regret, I don't know how to deal with. I don't know how I would deal with.
Have you ever
That's the
dealt with
scary
it?
part. I do regret leaving golf.
Yep.
Less now.
Yep.
Because I have found something that I really like. And
Is that in the gym?
no, just work. The current work that I do, gaming industry, applied AI research, I love it. It's a lot of fun. If I hadn't found that, this would be a tough conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely do regret that a little bit.
I think also important for everyone to know here that you played golf at the highest level, right? At your peak, you were North India
I played in
number
India.
2, I believe.
Yeah.
You went to Thailand, you played the Asian Games, right?
Yeah.
There's definitely subtext to how much you may be regretting that, something like that, right? Because you made it to a level that very few ever will.
Yes.
And these are the kinds of people whose entire life is dedicated to just golf or tennis or football, whatever they pick.
Yes.
And for you, you made it to that level in this country, right? So I can understand the sentiment behind why, right? Like getting out of that and even being positive enough to find something else is it's a task,
Yes.
right? Like you're trying to deal with, oh, I gave up on golf. Now I need to find something else. And those kind of emotions, like, where did you find the balance and say, you know what, like, I need to accept that
Mhm.
golf's not a part of my life the same way anymore, and
Mhm.
I got to find my next sport of entry.
I never thought about it. I blocked it out completely. So I stopped playing golf in end of 11th. We were 17, I think. I didn't touch another golf club for about 6 years. Because I couldn't. It'd be painful. And I was very scared to just play golf again. It's better now because it's a slight regret now. It's not a big regret now, right? And that's another thing about sports, right? Hats off to people who go, like, actually follow it through. It's a scary thing to do, especially at that age. But the thing about sports, at least what I've realized, is now that I play golf, I play like what, 3 rounds, 4 rounds a year, right? And I'm playing very close to what I used to. Like, sure, okay, I had a handicap of 3, I used to play under par, whatever. I don't do that now. I'm still shooting single digits. And if I'm doing that with 4 rounds a year, I would have been good if I played, right? And that maturity in sports comes at a very different time for different people. Because I knew kids at the age of 12, at the age of 14, at the age of 17, shooting rounds unheard of for that age. And then a few years later, they just fall off. And I know of people who had the worst games of their life throughout childhood, but they stuck with it and turned pro, had a bad year, had a bad 2 years. But after that, the trajectory was unimaginable.
Yep.
And it's just, I don't know what it is, but it's this sports maturity that just comes in at some age.
Mm-hmm.
And it just works. And that's the trust the process, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, it's a lot easier said than done because I can say this in retrospect. In the moment, I never knew if that maturity would come.
Yeah.
Right? And so I was good, sure, but I wasn't good enough. And that was enough for me to know. Because opportunity cost was high as well, right? Like, I could do something else. And that level of comfort, all of that ruins a lot of things.
Yeah.
Comfort ruins a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever regret not playing tennis?
Yeah, a lot. Several times, and I think part of why I find tennis in all parts of my life wherever I can. Whether it's playing, I'm coaching right now. I think I came to a conclusion pretty early in college life that this is not where I'm playing professional. How can I keep it in my life at a level where it'll fulfill me? And to your maturity point, right? I think we're fortunate we learned these sports so young that our foundations were built ultimately as sportsmen more so than anything else.
Yes.
And this goes back to that discipline consistency piece. Like, a lot of this was subconsciously just etched into our memories from school life. We were showing up Monday, Wednesday, Friday, sometimes 4 days a week at 5 in the morning to school to practice basketball, football, whatever we were going for. That kind of discipline consistency is foundational to at least how I've built my character, and I know that's the same for you. So at this point in my life, as long as tennis can play as significant a role as I can make it play in my life, I am at peace, and I don't think I regret it anymore.
That's good.
For me now, it's keep this in my life, have the best tennis experiences, and know that you're not going to be playing center court at Wimbledon against Carlos Alcaraz. That's not going to happen. So it's that awareness piece, which is an entire different topic that we can cover at a later stage. But it comes with its own fair share of like learnings, right?
Yeah.
And touch wood, we've grown up with so much sport in our life that it builds character. And that's the funny part. Like, I spoke to a CEO, hopefully we have him on the podcast one day. Spoke to him about 2 weeks back, and he looked at me and he said, I interview maybe 20 to 30 different people every week. He said, everyone has unique technical skill sets.
Yes.
Everyone has unique experiences. the best character that you see in a human being is on a sporting field. Because
Wow.
it tests everything. It's gonna test your character, it's
Mhm.
gonna test your discipline, your teamwork, your temper.
Yes.
And when he said that, it got me thinking, I've grown up with this and it's just kind of been a part of me. But for people, they really have to work on this kind of stuff
Yeah.
now. And I think to do a lot of that at a later age is harder, right? Because you've learned
Yeah.
so much and now you have to unlearn and relearn. Versus for us, it was just, we were curious young kids that were just playing,
Yeah.
right? So it was very interesting. And honestly, I hope we have him one day because it's those kind of perspectives
Mhm.
that we'd only get from people like that.
Yeah.
So it's definitely interesting. I'm shifting gears a little now
Mhm.
because I think we've gotten really deep,
Yes.
and we'll continue to get deep
Yeah.
throughout the reign of our podcast. How do you feel being called the gym boy?
I don't like it. I don't like it because I feel like it isolates a part of me. Which it's. I'm not saying it's a bad part of me, but it's not the only part of me. Right?
Okay, I beg to differ.
I know you do. Yeah, so it compartmentalizes all of me into a very small part of me. And I mean, it is what it is, fair enough, right? Like, there are always stereotypes, there are always going to be stereotypes. It's interesting because I think generally, just, on the surface, you think, yeah, that's a nice thing, that's a good way to be categorized. But it's not easy to break out of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's not nice. But I mean, it is what it is, right? Like, I could be called way worse things.
You're a gym boy.
Probably rightly
Exactly.
so. So
Exactly.
I mean, it is.
You
what
are
it
a
is.
gym boy. I think the only thing that I wanna end this with asking you.
Mm.
There's one thing for the listeners.
Mm.
What would you leave them with on what they can expect on this podcast, and why they should be listening to us and our guests?
That's a good question. I think there's a very large part of the population that's in very similar stages of life to us. In the sense that lost, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to figure any of that out. Because the first step is how do you figure it out, and then you can figure it out. But it's complete darkness when you don't even know how to figure it out,
Mhm.
right? And generally, out of the entire age spectrum, I would assume, it's a big assumption, but I would assume that it's around your 20s that you feel the most lost, right? And maybe there are some older people listening to this who are just cursing me out right now. Maybe you're always lost. I don't know. But I think it's nice for people to know that they're not alone in it. And it's nice for people to get a lot of those surrounding perspectives, knowledge, experience that we'll be getting talking to all of the people that we will hopefully talk to. And I think that's powerful. Knowing you're not alone is powerful.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Honestly, if it can help even one person, it's worth it, right? And
Yep.
with the power of spreading information the way you can now, it's wrong to not try.
Yeah.
Right.
Be part of the spread. Yeah, I think I echo most of what you said, and the only additional thing is when I came to you as well, I came to you on an evening when I had gone for an event before and I met a lot of people. And these were all people much older than me. The one thing that I feel I want to bring out the most is relatability. Right? Like, can someone listening to this here go back and say, I resonate with that. Like, I felt that. They're feeling that. They've got a guest that's also felt that. And that kind of relatability I think gives people hope. It gives them encouragement. It says everyone goes through the same positive experiences, the same shit, and it's just about finding that balance in your own life. And so that's exactly what I want to do here, right? Like echoing what you said, and also just bringing out as much relatability as we can between our age group, elder, younger, across the board. I want to make sure that we can get all kinds of guests on here and have the most raw conversations so that people really expose who they are and what is pushing them and why they are where they are. And I started with this and I'm going to end with the same thing. But yeah, I think honestly that's it from me. Like, is there something else that you want to leave the audience with?
Not really. That was a lot.
Yeah,
I want to watch that back to process it because honestly, I don't remember a lot of what we talked about.
definitely. A lot to unpack.
Yeah.
A lot to unpack. But for everyone out there listening, from our end, our goal again is to bring all of you the best content, and just stay tuned. We're gonna keep pushing out content. We're gonna try to bring on the best guests. So your support is extremely appreciated, and see you guys in the next one. Thank you for listening.